The brutality of the games, the clamor. You feel it in your skin one last time. The heat of an inclement midday sun, the roar of the crowd. They inundate your senses and paint in your mind the scenes of your youth when your father took you to the arena for the first time. You remember him telling you about the family business, lanista, they call you, trainers of the most ferocious gladiators Rome had ever known. Now you're old, and have therefore seen many of them pass the training barracks, have seen rising stars getting crowned kings of the games, and others collapse under their own self-assuredness. But what you know is that the world will never be the same once the sun sets on this brutal sport. The violence that was once contained by the walls of this Colosseum will once again flood the streets, where no glory can be found, no glory like the one your father's gladiators knew, as did your own. The crowd clamors, once again, one final time, and your fighter enters the arena. He's as fierce as his opponent, but there is something in his eyes, the concentrated essence of Ares himself, a god of war made flesh and ire made iron. You sigh. Poor devil, you think to yourself, for you know that these games will be the last, since the emperor has forbidden the games. A new age of civility, he calls it, as he spits in the face of history. Your heart truly aches for your champion. Trained since childhood in battle, soon he will have no place to be. Perhaps the army, you think? The beast always fat and hungry for flesh and meat. But even there, you know, he will know no glory like the one in the Colosseum. Still a slave to a new master, but no longer a god of the arena. Welcome to Rebel Economics, where today we will talk about the crazy economics of gladiator battles, their role in the societal structure of ancient Rome, and the symmetries that exist with some of our current economic practices. If that sounds interesting, hit the like button and consider subscribing. We have tons of content regarding economics and business on this channel that I am sure you will enjoy. But now, back to the video. The advent of gladiator battles might not have originated with the express focus of pacifying the population, but the rulers of ancient Rome, as well as their colonies across the Mediterranean, soon realized the impact of the Great Games as a method for controlling one of the largest empires in the classical world. Rome, being as it was, during its many years, constantly involved in wars against either invading forces or actively engaged in campaigns of conquest, the impact of the hardship of war was sometimes felt by the population. From the impact on goods and food having to be sent to the front, to the much more pressing danger of an invading force penetrating the mainland of the empire, citizens' trust on their rulers was certainly put to the test. Enter the gladiatorial games. As it has been reported by many historians much better qualified than me, the games were seen by many rulers both in Rome and at more local levels as a fundamental mechanism to pacify the population, especially during times of extreme tension, like times of war or disease. The games were then held and hosted by a sort of agreement between what was then the public sector, that being the ruling group of a particular city like the patricians in Rome, as well as other lower-ranked individuals. The private side of this partnership was generally taken by several gladiatorial trainers, and in many cases, the owner of those people were called lanista. In the social fabric of Rome, the gladiators enjoyed a complicated status. On the one hand, since the majority of them were slaves owned by the dominant lanista, their standing was as low as it could be, with the high society actively despising them and considering them not much better than animals. But on the other hand, they were some of the highest celebrities in the land, akin to actors or athletes nowadays. Therefore, Their lives were lived on the razor's edge of society, whereby they were sometimes surrounded by the high aristocracy of Rome, but with barriers clearly defined as to where their place was. Most gladiators, being as they were slaves, were not paid a wage, and their expenses were generally paid for by their domine, or master, the lanista responsible to train, feed, and house them. However, after a successful run as a gladiator, some particularly exceptional gladiators could obtain a rudis, a wood sword that symbolized the end of their lives as property, and the beginning of a new one as free men. The gladiators that owned the rudis were called rudiari, and were considered an equal member of the plebeians, or the lower class of free men and women under the Republic. It is important to note that not every gladiator accepted the rudis, and some chose to remain as slaves and keep fighting on the arena. One exceptional gladiator, named Flamma, or Flame, refused the rudis 4 times, and every time returned to the arena until his death at the age of 30. From some archaeological evidence found in Sicily, Flamma, a Syrian soldier that was captured during a Roman campaign in the land, managed to win over 20 battles, something absolutely spectacular. The reason why he did this is sadly lost to history, but many believe that he did so to help change the opinion of the Roman Republic about the Syrians who have been defeated in battle. If so, he clearly succeeded, because even to this day his story is being told as one of the toughest gladiators in history. However, for those that took the rudis and became free men, the doors of the arena were sometimes open for a return. Considering that a slave man in ancient Rome that had been groomed to do only one thing for his entire life, being released into the world without any economic skills and much prejudice against him is not an easy future to face. So many decided to return to the arena. But let's talk wages for a minute. I said that slaves did not receive any wages during their servile status, meaning that, in case that they were victorious, only their domine lanista would get paid. And this is true, strictly speaking. But in many cases, aware of the importance of maintaining a good relationship with their gladiators, the lanista would kick some percentage of the benefits their way, but more as a sort of show of respect than a veritable wage. However, when a free man decided to return to the arena, he was indeed paid, but the situation here it gets a little complicated. While solo freeman gladiators did, in fact, join the games at times, this was not as common as the freemen doing a deal with their previous lanista, or other lanista for that matter, to split the profits of their victory in exchange for room, board, food, and training material. This was, however, a relationship of somewhat equals. The stratified system of ancient Rome made it very difficult for free gladiators to discuss, essentially, employment with their previous domine on equal footing. In many cases, a lanista had direct access to the figures in the public sectors with whom the games were organized, so by writing a few letters, the newly free man could be banned from participating in the games, which could considerably cut his earning potential down to absolute zero. So in many cases, the improvement in living conditions and remunerations that came from a free man joining a ludus, or the gladiatorial companies organized by the lanista, were less than those that could be expected, but still obviously better than as a slave. From the perspective of the lanista, the economics of the gladiatorial battles were more similar to our own modern concept of businesses, even if we must not forget that we're always discussing a business for which a well-oiled system of slavery and exploitation were fundamental. The lanista owned and managed a ludus, a company that focused on training people to become successful gladiators. The lanista would offer room and board, as mentioned before, and the gladiators would offer their labor, and sometimes their very lives in the arena. The general flow of capital from a lanista perspective would be as follows. Among the fundamental expenses would be the purchasing of new slaves from the slavers that caught them in occupied lands during a campaign or by other means, their feeding and housing cost for all of their gladiators and the costs associated to training them, from the standard equipment to the payments procured sometimes to their doctore, or the trainers in the ludus. Additionally, as we mentioned before, in case the gladiators at the ludus were free men, the lanista would have to pay a wage to them, though this is generally settled by dividing the earnings of the gladiator if he were to be successful. Their income, however, is more straightforward. Lanista were generally paid by whoever wanted to organize the gladiatorial games, from the state to other rich families. Additionally, the lanista would receive even more money as a prize if the winner belonged to their ludus, instead of to another lanista's ludus. And finally, of course, the lanista could make money by selling some of their slave gladiators he owned to another ludus or to an interested third party. The gladiatorial battles were abolished in 325 AD, when Constantine, considered to be the first Christian emperor of Rome, made them illegal in the territories of the Republic due to them having no place in a time of civil and domestic peace, as he said. The brutality and legend of the industry died a slow death, though, with many clandestine games still being held after the abolition, as well as in the furthest reaches of the empire, where the gaze of the patricians was weak. The business of gladiatorial battles is an outgrowth of a system of slavery that brought many young slaves to the iron gates of the Roman Colosseum, only to die brutalized by much more experienced opponents, or actual predators, like lions and tigers. This corporatized system of brutality is, however, etched in the fabric of history and has since become legend, one that we will do well to remember in its utmost complexity. Thank you for watching Rebel Economics. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Crazy Economics series. We have some interesting topics coming up, like the economics of anarchism and the video game industry. If you like this video, why not drop a like and consider subscribing? And in case you're interested in topics similar to these, why not check out some of the other videos on the screen? Thank you, and I will see you on the next one.